Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are actually a minute or two early, so I'm going to give you guys a minute to log in. I'm going to tweet this out. You might have gotten a notification, Miss Tess, as well. So I'm just going to retweet this just so it's out even more. Okay. For all of you who are watching right now, before I get into my intro, I have a white noise machine in the background just to, I'm in a household where everybody else is having meetings right now. If you can hear it, if it's becoming a problem, please let me know and I'll turn off the white noise machine. If you barely can hear it, then that's great. So just let me know in the comments if that is what's happening. All right, so good evening, everyone. Welcome. If you are tuning in for the first time, this is the La Maison de Rouge Monday night weekly live broadcast. I am your host, Lucy Sweetkill, one half of the duo that is La Maison de Rouge. A little bit about who we are. LMDR is dedicated to expanding the BDSM experience by discussing, educating, and informing our audiences about the intersections of kink, wellness, sexuality, spirituality, and social activism. We aim to create a safe space for discussing these topics, as well as providing an avenue for our guests to share their stories and experiences. Thank you again for joining us. Tonight, our guest is UK-based professional and lifestyle dominatrix of untouchable elegance. A firm believer in Femdom principles, she advocates CFNM and considers herself a matriarch. Please welcome, pronoun she, her, Mistress Tess. Welcome, Tess. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Great. Thank you for joining us. I know it's late for you, early for me. We somehow are meeting in the middle of New York time, 7 p.m.
Yeah, I'm talking from way across the ocean, meeting in the middle.
I know. Usually I'm on the East Coast, and so it's kind of funny that we're both just like this far apart from the actual time zone we're going for. Well, so this is your first time on our show, and so we're really happy to have you. We're really happy that we could get you on. I know that we reached out not too long ago as well, so we're really, you're very well known in the industry, and so we thought, who we need to get is Mistress Tess. Let's see if she's available, because it's going to be around midnight when this is recorded. So how we start our interviews is the first question, the first thing we always want to know, the first thing all our guests always want to know is, how did Mistress Tess become Mistress Tess? What is your origin story? How did you become a professional dominatrix?
Well, thank you for having me. I guess it's quite a long-winded story, so I'll try and give you the shorter version, but I went straight from school at 16 into an apprenticeship in mechanical engineering, and I worked in the industry for about 9 years before I was repeatedly made redundant from a string of engineering firms during the recession. And I was pole dancing at the gym for exercise. I'd been doing that for quite some time, and a friend of mine there was doing some lap dancing. And she said to me, look, if you really, at the time, for the last redundancy, I was single. I'd been divorced, and I had a child to support, so I was panicking. And she said to me, you should come along to do a shift at work. So I went along, but very quickly realized that with my mentality of being quite, straightforward and very, just forward, basically, and not wanting, I'm not used to me having to hustle men. It's usually men who come to me. I've been using my feminine charm since I was a teenager at my job at engineering. So I was used to having men dance to my tune. So I don't want to be approaching men. So I didn't get on with that very well. But whilst in that environment, I met some very nice ladies, and one of which was into amateur modeling. And she said, you might get on better with that because, there's none of this public aspect. You get paid an hourly rate, which is discussed up front and everything. And so I got into doing a bit of that, mostly for men's portfolios to practice. I did a couple of naturist magazines because I only went to like a nude art level. I never did anything adult, just my own personal preference. And whilst I was doing that, about a year in, a gentleman came to shoot me for a collaborative shoot who, as soon as I removed my shoes, could not stop talking about my feet. And turns out he had a huge foot fetish and was telling me all about opportunities for women to work in clubs in London that were like strip clubs, but that were for women who just came and took their shoes off, and men came and paid to have foot worship and stuff. I was like, this can't be a thing. So I was like, I thought he was lying. I was like, yeah, sure. And he's like, no, honestly, Google it. So I went away and Googled it, and then birthed a Twitter page based around foot worship and foot content. And I mean, like I said, I've always been a bossy, assertive woman, and you know, I know what I want and I go for it. But the more Skype sessions I was booking in for foot worship, they were asking me to do other things on the side, like, can you instruct me on what to do with my cock and, you know, how to hurt it? And I'm like, really? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, if I look backwards now, jumping forward slightly, there's been several occasions in the bedroom with exes where I've done things that are of a kink orientation, but just not known they had a label like that. I've done bondage, I've done anal play and things like that, but just not known basically what I was doing in terms of they come under a bracket. And so yeah, I was asked to do all these things and I was quite enjoying it. I had a guy stick a fire engine to his penis with some super glue. I had another guy hitting himself with a wooden spoon, and I had one other guy tying his balls to the radiator, and it just progressively got regulars who were asking me to do more than just the foot worship. And it wasn't until one of my regulars said to me about 6 months in, have you ever thought about being a professional dominatrix? And I was like, I don't really know what one is. He said, well, you're kind of already doing it on an online basis. He says, you know, maybe go off and do a bit of research. So I went off and did a bit of a Google, and I bought a book on professional domination, and it just went from there, snowballed from there. One of the pieces of advice that I read repeatedly on forums and blog posts of other DOMs was to look around your local area, find a lady that you kind of like or admire their style, and see if they were willing to teach you some of their knowledge. And I contacted Nikki Whiplash, who was based in Hampshire, which was only about an hour and a half from where I lived. Loved her outlook, and she invited me along to film with her. She didn't do apprenticeships, but she was using women who are models and newbies to come along and do filming for her various different platforms she had. And she just taught me a wealth of knowledge over a period of a few different filming days. And the association with her in the beginning really gave me quite a step up, I guess, in the community, which was I was really grateful for. So. And then since then, it's just become my love. I started off a year doing it on side of my full-time job. And then it got so to the point where I had to give it my full focus. So I ended up quitting my full-time job, and I've been doing it full-time now for 4 years.
Wow. So it's, you know, it's kind of interesting how you went from in a whole different career that you thought, and then just kind of doing this thing that you're just like, okay. Did any of the things that people asked you to do, were you like, no, I can never do that?
Yes, I have asked I had a guy ask me to watch if he could watch me poop on camera. And I was just like, no, that's not something I'm willing to do. And I'm not naive to the fact that actually at the beginning, some people would have classed, I guess, what I was going through a little bit of topping from the bottom, because it weren't services that I was offering.
Yeah.
But these were making these requests. But I didn't look at it that way. I just looked at it as my way of me gaining knowledge at that point.
Yeah.
Obviously, I can look at the warning signs now. I'm a lot more experienced and see when men are trying to manipulate me into doing things. But I can't ever say I did anything that I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
Ever. I don't do that in life. So why would I start doing that? Why would I start doing that on camera? It was just, like I said, with the modelling, I got asked to do adult and some silly tributes or payment for it. But it just wasn't something that I felt comfortable with myself. So I just didn't do it. So.
So when did you start doing, because you were doing a lot of stuff via camera, right? And sometimes in these parties, these foot worship parties, when did you start really getting into the dungeon, playing, having sessions, like, and how did that look like for you?
So my first professional session was with a guy, again, that I'd been speaking to probably for about 6 months regularly on cam. He lived in my hometown. I no longer lived there. He lived in my hometown and had been an experienced player on the scene for 20, 25 years. And he had a studio of his own in his garage conversion. And I do look back and think, well, maybe it was probably a little bit of a risk, but I did get a reference from someone else for him, and they said it was very genuine. And she also lived in my hometown. And he agreed to pay me whatever tribute I felt comfortable with doing for a 2-hour session to do exactly as I pleased within his limits, to learn. And I turned up there and I loved it. I absolutely crapped myself. I really did worry. Like, I had quite a lot of anxiety because obviously I was turning up at this person's house wearing the first time I'd ever put on any latex, and and that sort of, for somebody who wasn't at the time my partner, and I was carrying a bag full of stuff that I hadn't really ever used. So I got there and he made me feel quite relaxed quite early on, I think, because obviously he was very knowledgeable. And so my first session wasn't in a dungeon, it was in his studio, and he had a winch and some whips, and he had different bondage things, bits and pieces. And we had quite an interesting 2 hours. We did some whipping and some orgasm control, and then more whipping and orgasm control. And it was like sensual mixed in with sadistic, which I quite enjoy that vibe now. It's something that I quite like. So, and I was just hooked from there, really. And that was September 5 years ago. So I think I went on to do my first dungeon session probably about 4 weeks after that. Which again was a whole different experience in itself. You walk in and think, oh my goodness, it's like a torture chamber in here. I've never been in one before, and what do I do with that piece of equipment? What do I do with that? But again, and this was another guy that I'd been talking to online for some time, and the guy that actually said to me, have you ever thought about being a professional dominatrix? So he did kind of nurture me, top me from the bottom, whatever you like to say, into his kinks at the beginning. But that gave me so much knowledge. That gave me a starting point, somewhere for me to sort of say, okay, well, this is somewhere to start. What do I like in this field? And then, so I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, I think there's sort of a time and place for the topping from the bottom, Like, I know a lot of subs who like seeing new people because first they really like, their fetishes, they really like specific activities, specific kinks. But the great thing is you can help teach a new person those stuff, and it's okay to kind of be a service top and kind of top from the bottom so that the other person can learn. Because when you're new, like yourself, when you're new, you're like, I don't, there's no formal learning, right?
Yeah, there isn't, no. There's no manual.
There's no like schooling you go through for the most part. And so I think there's a lot of subs who can teach a lot of tops who are, dominants who start like, oh, hey, this is kind of my thing and this is how I like it. But then you get to like go, okay, I have this knowledge. Now I can kind of figure out what I want to do with it.
Make it your own. It was exactly that for me, yeah.
So how has your play changed since then?
Well, it's funny because I've had a couple of ladies recently ask me this question, like who have been sort of dabbling with the idea of perhaps, turning to professional domination. And I guess my answer would be that I started with, I guess, what you could call, like I said, hit a couple of his likes, then discovered a couple of things that I liked, and then looked at other people's things and thought, well, what would I like from that? I started with, I guess, maybe 5 or 10 basic play activities, from things like flogging, spanking, orgasm control, bondage, light bondage. And then when I felt fully comfortable with the things that I'd started with, I was getting to the point where I was meeting other people. I was going to events, I was going to parties, I was going to meet with other DOMs for lunches and coffees and stuff, and spending more time with those ladies, and then watching what they're doing and thinking, oh, well, maybe I would like to try that. And I'd try that. and it just snowballed into it's like when I first started, needle play was a hefty hard limit for me. Every time I'd been to a doctor for a needle, I'd passed out. I'd just been on the floor. So there was no way I could. I was thinking, if nobody wants a horizontal dominatrix. If I put a needle in somebody, I'm gonna pass out. For the year and a half before I got my own alchemy rooms last year, I was using regularly my base dungeon, a dungeon called the Fallen Angel Studio, which is based in Milton Keynes, and the mistress that runs that, Domina Sara, she's heavily into medical play. And we sat having a coffee one day, and she's like, "Well, why don't you want to do needle play?" And I was like, "Well, I'm so worried I'm going to pass out. I'm kind of fascinated." And she called her husband in, and he sat down, and we started doing she did some on his arm, and I'm watching her thinking, "Well, this isn't so bad," because I'd never seen anybody do it or anything. Mm-hmm. And she's like, "Have a go." And I'm like, "Really?" And she's like, "Yeah, just a small," and she told me how and everything. And I was like, "This is really easy." And I really enjoyed it. And now it's something I do a lot of. I mean, I've done 200, 300, 400 needles in some sessions. So I quite like it. And I can honestly say that most of the limits I had at the beginning are gone. Only ones that still remain really are, I don't do hard sports. It's just not for me. And
what do you define as hard sports? Because that is a term that does confuse a lot of people in the audience. So I always like to.
So I guess hard sports is anything to do with poop, anything to do with shit. So I don't, whether it's playing, eating, digesting, watching, it's just not something for me. I have tried it, but it's just, it's not something that I would like to indulge in. And then I don't do adult baby. That's the only other limit I've still got. I've tried it again as well. It's not for me. I would never, each to their own and everything. I'm very much an open-minded person that way. But I don't know, I didn't feel connected with it. So, and I think that's important. You have to feel connected with whatever it is you're doing, because otherwise it shows. So I just there. But at the beginning I had knife play, I had anything to do with blood, I had needle play, I had water sports, and they're all gone. I do all of those. I enjoy them very much. But I guess I was I was creating those limits for myself based on things that I thought I knew. But then when you get to know things better, and you educate yourself on it, then you think, oh, well, actually, so.
Well, I really love what it sounds like to me. What I really love about your journey is that you were coming from a place of your interest as well.
Yeah.
Not always just like, I see this sometimes where people are so focused on the other person that they forget, like, what is their interest in this?
Yeah.
And people sense it.
I've fallen into that trap a couple of times,
Mm-hmm.
over the years, when you start to build a regular.
Yeah.
Because initially I'm not naive. I don't tell people I'm a service provider. We all are. The base line of it is we are. People approach us for a certain service. But the way that I step away from that as much as possible is I have a website that says exactly what it is I'm interested in and what my limits are. And if they are mutual, then they come to me and I review their application and I approve or reject their application. And then unless they specifically mention, say like they list 10 fetishes or 10 kinks or 10 activities they want to indulge in, unless they specifically say out those 10, I really want to explore more strap on, I'll design the session. If it's only an hour, say, you can only fit maybe 4 or 5 of those in, I'll design the session exactly how I like. And if they don't enjoy the way that I tailor that, then they're not for me, because that's my way of keeping control of it, or my way of keeping it me, I guess, in the dominant position that I'm not just being dictated to what to do. I'm tailoring it to what I feel like I want to do and how I want to control the session. So there is that. But I have fallen into the trap of when you build regulars, you've got a guy you've seen 7 or 8 times over the last 6 months, where you're thinking, oh God, what does he want to know? What does he want to do next? What does he want to do next? And you start thinking, overthinking it, like he's not going to come back to me if I keep doing the same thing, or if I don't do this. And then I've had to check myself and say, look, if you just keep authentic, and keep to what you want to do, you'll keep the people that you're meant to keep, and the people you're not meant to keep will fly away. That's just the nature of this business.
Yeah.
And the minute you start moving away from being authentic and not doing the things that you want to do is the minute this becomes stressful. And I didn't leave a full-time job in an office to do something that was stressful. I found this and I stumbled across it, and I think this is where I'm supposed to be, and I want to keep as close to me being my authentic self and what I feel happy doing as I possibly can.
Yeah.
So
I totally agree. First off, this career path is not an easy path. That like your play, like, yes, there are things we don't really want to do. The admin, the marketing, whatever, you know, we have too much of that your play should be like the core of the job should be something that you want to do. Like, because there are easier routes to go down, right?
Yeah. Oh,
than to try to fake your interest in BDSM. Like,
yeah, I've been offered stupid money to do things that are outside of my limits, and I've just said I'm sorry, it's just not something that I feel comfortable doing. I don't feel comfortable doing it, and I think that's the biggest trap I see women fall into with this. And I get it, particularly after this year, we can all relate. It's a difficult year, and some people are struggling, and at the end of the day, we all have to eat. But it's the biggest trap I see is women falling into the pattern of doing things for money and not doing things that they consider are good for them and good for their mental health and the way that will come across. I mean, it certainly does with me. Well, I'm not very good at disclosing, hiding my emotions. So if I'm not enjoying something, it very clearly shows. And I know if I was paying somebody a tribute to be there and present with me, enjoying something that I find quite intense and sexual or something I've harbored for many years, if they look like they weren't enjoying it, that would just completely destroy me. So I wouldn't want to do that to somebody else either. So
yeah, I completely agree. And I love how you've said that. You know, I think it's very clear. And I think that's such an important thing, especially because I know there are going to be new DOMs who are going to be watching this, new clients, you know, new people. Like, it's got to come from a place of authenticity and not just doing it for the money, because it shows. Like, people feel it. And I think you hear it from clients too. Oh, she just kind of did this for 15 minutes and then this for 15 minutes and then this for it just seemed like she just went down the list of my interests, instead of like, yes, they may be sending you an application, but it's got to match you. And be like, oh, because I turn down applications all the time. People will write stuff and I'll be like, that's not my style. And that's fine. There's somebody else who could be your style, because I don't want to have to I don't want to force myself to do something that I don't enjoy. Like I already have to do that with the marketing and advertising part of our job. So this is, I wanted to get your thoughts on this. You went from cam work, doing a lot of online work, to then in-person work, and now back to camming stuff because of COVID. How has that, what are your thoughts around that? How have you felt about that?
I guess like me starting off at cam, you need to also sort of remember I still was earning a full-time wage, or at least an alternative wage, because I kept the modeling up. And then actually shortly after I started the modeling and got introduced to this, I did take on another full-time job. And I did that full-time job, like I said, for around a year before I stopped that again and made this into a full-time profession. So I did always have a fallback of sorts. So if I ever got bored of doing cam sessions, I could just go, you know what, I've had enough of this. I'm going to leave it for a while. But now it's a different story. Now this is my income. And because professional sessions have been withdrawn, there's no option to do those. There is a pressure there to do it, and it's not that I don't enjoy it. It's just it's almost a completely different circle of men. It's not the men that I see. I get the odd cam session with a guy that I've sessioned with, don't get me wrong, but generally it's not. Generally it's the guys that do this all year long, every year anyway. They're not the people that are coming for real-time sessions. So the mentality is completely different. The etiquette is different. And I very quickly lose my patience. So, you know, if I have to tell somebody like a 20th time to address me correctly in a chat room, I just end up cutting the camera off now. It's becoming a point. So I definitely have to motivate myself a lot more for cam, and I'll go through periods of doing it. Because even before COVID, I was still flicking on the camera maybe once every couple of months and doing maybe a week here or there, and then going, yeah, that's enough for me now, and I'll come back to it again. So it definitely takes a lot of motivation for me to get to that. And I do try and steer people towards the pre-booking sessions, because when you're using a platform like Adult Work or Chatterbait or Night Flirt, where they can just dial in and dial out, it doesn't sit comfortably with me, because it makes me feel like I'm just a pop-up shop, and that doesn't make me feel very dominant. I want to be here. I want to know you are approaching me, and you take my attention as a privilege, and that's quite a difficult thing to convey on cam.
Yeah, I agree. It's been for those who really enjoy in-person work, it's been a rough ride.
Yeah, I mean, I can half relate. I like I said to you, I'm quite diverse. I can be changeable, but I do have my limits, and they have been tested this summer. I do not like talking on the phone. I hate it. I don't know why. I like seeing who I'm talking to, whether that's cam or in real person. So talking on the phone is not something I'm good at. And I've really stepped out of my comfort zone this summer and flicked on a phone line for the first time in 5 years. And it's been a challenge. There's been a number of times where I've just hung up, or I've really enjoyed the conversation, then they've hung up mid-club, and it is really difficult.
Yeah. How about texting? You know, there's a lot of the...
I've got, through the COVID, I've been doing a lot more of that. And that I quite enjoy, particularly if they pay for a block of time and we do like a role play. I've got a guy who has just ordered a custom clip-on for me, actually, based on our text sessions we've been having since May. And he'll pop up once a month, and we'll have half an hour text session. And that'll go a bit like Dungeons and Dragons style. It'll go, right, I'm opening the door and I'm walking in and I'm wearing a full latex catsuit. What would you think? Or where would your eyes be? And we play it like that, almost like a step-by-step Dungeons and Dragons role play type text. And I quite enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Or if they want to come on and talk to me about how they would enjoy, what they would enjoy if they came to session with me. What they would like to explore with me, so it's more of a kinky chat. So those, I've quite enjoyed those. I've done quite a few of those recently.
Yeah, there's such a variety now. You've got to get really try the different things. So yeah, it is interesting to see what you connect with, right? You have to try. I think so many providers right now are just trying all the different things to see what connects with them, because it is hard when you do in-person work. There's so much connection and intimacy that's happening, and that's hard to replace.
Yeah, and I am typically an outgoing Gemini. I do thrive off social interaction. I'm very, very extroverted, so it is very different to try and get that across a screen. Trying to make that connection is quite hard to do that over a laptop. It is definitely a transition.
So we talked about some of your limits, ones that kind of activities you don't do. What would you say are right now, because it doesn't have to be forever, but maybe right now, what are top 3 activities, kinks, fetishes that you really enjoy right now?
I like that you said just right now, because every time I've had a conversation in the last sort of 2-3 years, when obviously I've got more experience, the Dom's like, oh, what's your niche? And it's like, don't really have a niche, because the minute I think you start to market yourself into a niche is the time. I like diversity, so I want to keep myself open for, I don't want people. I've had it already where maybe there's been a period I've had a lot of masochists come along, and I've put that content out there on my marketing, and they're gone, oh, I know you're really sadistic, but do you think you could do a sensual session? And it's like, well, hang on a minute, I've done loads of sensual sessions. What are you talking about? And then the mindset people get in from seeing your marketing, just from what you're posting, from what you're up to at the time, they start to materialize what you're actually like. And so I never go with a niche, but I'd say at the moment my top 3 definitely are whipping, ball busting, and I probably anal play, in terms of light anal play, nothing too heavy. Just because of that's been dictated to me with COVID. The partner that I'm with at the moment, he is into quite a few of those fetishes, and that's quite a change for me, because I've never been with somebody who's into masochistic stuff, and so I'm exploring it quite a lot from a personal point of view, as well as carrying it over into my professional life. So I'm really enjoying those activities.
That's awesome. Yeah, I always feel it evolves. So, there's certain months where I'm like, this is the thing I'm really into. And then like a few months later, I'm like, this is the thing I really want to do right now.
Yeah, I can relate.
Yeah, it's got to come from a genuine place of interest. And it evolves. I think you seem like a chameleon. I can relate to that because I feel very much like a chameleon. There's not like one specific area that I think we both have, many providers, we all have perverted minds. We are like, we like all the perverted things. So
all crazy ideas that pop up. Yeah.
Especially when you're playing all the time, and then you might get influenced by someone's fantasy that they wrote to you, and you're like, wow, that's really good. I really want to that's something that I really want to see happening. Lately during COVID, I don't know what you're noticing, but during this time, I've noticed an influx of all the online work that I do during this time, which I prefer in-person work, but I've noticed a lot of the fantasies have been around forced by.
Yeah, I get a lot of that. You get a lot of that. It's almost like there's a deadly virus going around, so let's all suck dick.
I don't know. I feel like it's a weird influx that is happening right now.
Yeah. I've had a lot of that, and in fact a lot of the custom videos I've done throughout the lockdown have all been that orientated. It's really strange. I don't know whether it's because I think it's maybe if I was to very quickly psychoanalyze it, it's a lot of intimacy and sexual contact has been taken away during this period, hasn't it really? I mean, a lot of people have been isolating throughout the whole period. Maybe they're vulnerable, and also with our type of services and sex workers being withdrawn in a way or restricted, people haven't had the access that they usually would to or even the money to do the things they usually would. And the fantasies become more intimacy orientated. And I'm quite an advocate that there's not a human on this planet, I don't think, that is 110% straight, even if they can admire. It's just my personal opinion, but and I think particularly with men, they all of them harbor a fantasy pretty much of that in some way, shape, or form. It's certainly a lot of what I see anyway.
Yeah,
they've got some little bit in there, whether it ranges from just wanting to watch it, or they've thought about it, or they would never act on it, but it's been something they've been turned on by in the past. There's something in there. I do think that's something that's quite
well, definitely like porn, right? Because if you're a heterosexual male watching porn, and unless you're purely only watching girl on girl porn, there is a man in there that you're watching. And I also think every man all have like a little penis envy. They're all they're so focused on
it,
penis, right? In a way where I'm just like, you realize that as straight as you want to say you are, the focus on penis so much makes you a bit homoerotic. And that's okay. That is totally okay. But yeah, it's been a weird, I've been trying to just think about what's been happening this year, what kinks are starting to come up for people, especially during lockdown. And forced by has been in my universe, at least, what I've been getting is like force by everywhere. Force by chicks here, chicks there, suck all the you know, and just being a cum slut has been the big thing. Like, I'll just drink all the cum. I'll just, and I'm just like, I'm not sure that you're getting all this cum, but that's cool. But that's, I think that's the intensity of it. Yeah. It's been pretty amusing to me to see on the male side of things, like the amount of it. Yeah. It's good to hear that there are many other people who are getting lots of heavy force by requests and things like that.
I can honestly if you hadn't said first, I'd said probably the most custom clips I've had another penis involved. And a force by fantasy of some sort, and a lot of things I've talked to on cam is either been cuckolding or force by orientated.
Yeah, force by cuckolding. The goes very well together.
Yes.
That's a good combination.
Yeah.
So where do you, I know it's kind of hard during this time, but where do you see yourself growing within domination work, within this lifestyle? Where do you see not only yours, well, let's focus on you. Where do you see yourself going with this, your growth?
So I've always been interested in trying to be a little bit alternative. A bit of background, one of the main events that I've held over the years, and one of the only events really, I've done a couple of odd little foot or strap-on parties, but the main event that I'm known for is the Vanilla Corruption events. Now, these were born of a bachelorette party that I went to. A friend of a friend invited me along. I didn't know her that well, but I don't think she liked me after that because I kind of stole the show. I'd been a dominatrix for about 18 months beforehand, and you're sitting around at dinner and the conversation comes up. So what do you do? And I'm like, screw it, I'm going to tell him. And then it was just like, what does that mean? What does that mean? What do you do? What do you do? And the bride's like sat there and I'm like getting all these questions fired at me. And I said, you know what? If you really want to know what I do, I'll organise a small group of men. You can come to my house because I had quite a big land at the back. I'll hire a marquee. It's the summer. We'll get some guys along. I'll do some things to them and you can watch. If you want to try, you can try. It's a bit like a workshop entertainment type thing. And that's what born the Vanilla Corruption parties. And that was in 2016. And I've done at least one every year. Last year I did 3. And they were super popular. I'd always sell out the men. I'd have about 15 women. My mum would come. My aunt would sometimes come. My niece would come. And they'd watch me. And sometimes the most recent ones, because they were so popular, co-hosts, co-dominatrix, do different things to guys, needle play, impact play, anal play. And they would come up and have a go with whatever they felt comfortable with. And I like to think it would have been an introduction to Femdom. I know it certainly gave a couple of people some kink ideas to go away and do with their partners, but it was more from an entertainment value point of thing. Yeah. But the men loved it because they were being exposed, I guess, on a humiliation point of view to women who were like, like gasping at all this, like, almost like circus style at what they were seeing or what was going on. Oh my God, she's using that man's mouth as an ashtray. It was like, they couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of building some diversity into the scene because there wasn't anything like that in the UK when I did it, and the amount of women that have come to me since then and said, I've seen your events, would you mind if I did something similar? I'm like, go, spread the word, crack on. There's enough ass there's enough ass in this country for everybody to go ahead and do it. The only thing I've asked is that the trademark for my name, Vanilla Corruption, I've kept for myself, but you can call it whatever you like, and I'm happy for you to go ahead and spread the Femdom vibe. And I would love to come up with more ideas and ways to keep the scene diverse and do things that we don't usually have in the UK. And that's why the Gynarchy governance was something I was hoping would really take off this year, but unfortunately COVID has crashed that. So
the halt of it. But those parties sound amazing.
Yeah. My mum likes the bullwhip.
So before I open it up to questions, I do want to ask you about that. Your family, you mentioned your mother would come, so how did is it a cultural thing that just because it's more like, or is it your family specific that?
My parents have always been open-minded. Don't get me wrong, my father's like, I don't want to know the details. I don't want to know the details. But he's, I went and did an apprenticeship. I graduated. I did the pointy hat, and I made them all proud. And then I was like, look, I want to do something else. And I guess that was because obviously a lot of it was circumstance at the beginning, as I told you. But I've now found something that I truly enjoy, and they see that, and they know how much I flourish in this, and I think they're happy for me. But my mum actively likes to get involved. She keeps saying to me, when are we going to double dom? And I'm like, Mum, no. But she's so sweet. I let her come to the events. She likes to do impact play, and she likes to do humiliation stuff, and she really enjoys it. And when I had the unfortunate event of the dungeon breaking last year, she came, which they were part of the cleanup crew. They were cleaning paint off stuff, and they were doing stuff. So they've been super supportive. I'm very lucky, but I don't think not everybody in the UK is as lucky as me. When I talk to other ladies, quite a lot of them have to keep it rather private, or they've even been disowned by their parents, which I'm guessing is probably the same in America. You know, depends on how you were raised or what your parents were like when you were growing up. But I've always been very upfront with mine. So that's, it's very similar. Like if you have just like, a family that's very open-minded, it's great. I'm lucky. I have a very similar family to you, very open-minded. It's just not many people have that. But I think I would love to see like you and your mother in latex clad. I put some pictures on Twitter a little while ago because the anniversary of the last one last year, which was October, it came around, and I put some pictures, and there's a picture of me. I'm stood in front of a guy I'm about to strap on fuck. And she stood behind carrying this big dildo that I bought in a sex shop in Brighton. It's way too big to use. It's almost like an ornament, but it's a big silicone like this. And she's just holding it and she's laughing. And I think it's such a great picture.
She wants to be a dominatrix.
She does. Yeah, she does. She's very keen.
That's amazing. That's really great. So I want to open it up to questions to give time. So those of you who in our audience, please, if you have any questions, I will put them on screen. The questions should be respectful. They should be, just respectful. Let's just start with that. Here we go. What advice would you give your younger Dom self just starting out if you could go back?
Try not to get too emotionally invested is probably my biggest flaw. Well, I say flaw because it's not bad to build connections with people. It's not. It's human nature to want to connect with people. But I do get rather attached, and I've had to learn to distance myself a little bit more as years have gone on, because it only leads to heartbreak. Because a lot of guys in this scene are here and have been playing around for years, and they may stay with one. Somebody said to me, men are butterflies, so they may stay and cocoon and be with you for some time, or they may fly off and see another lady and come back. And I definitely got far too emotionally involved with the first few subs that I had, and when they left, it definitely did cause quite a lot of heartbreak. And I think I would go back and tell myself, just relax, enjoy them for the time that you've got them, and enjoy your time you have, and try not to stress about it too much.
Yeah, that's really good. It's really good advice. I think that's what happens is like you can't help it, right? Like there's an interest
even though they're coming to you, and like I said, you're putting yourself into an environment where you're receiving a tribute to spend time together, you start to build there's an intimacy between you, and you build that connection. And particularly if they repeatedly come to you, and you start to share more. And I know when I went into London today with one of my boys. He's been with me for 3.5 years, and we did some shopping, and we had lunch together, and we're talking about everything, his grandchildren, and we're talking about their house move, and I'm saying things about my life, and you just share that level of privacy that you perhaps wouldn't have, obviously, with just somebody who comes through the door for a session. And it's tough, because they become, on a way, I don't like to call it friends because that's not completely correct, because I still do like a level of etiquette where they are my subs.
They're
but
like your pets.
Family. Yeah, family. Good,
Yeah.
Good way. Yeah.
They're definitely like BDSM family, your
yeah.
pet. Like you
Yeah.
would feel, yeah, I definitely get that. And that's really great advice. I'm going to put this question up and ask, but you can definitely decline. So we have a question of Mistress. Are you willing to talk about the dungeon break-in?
Of course. I've got nothing to hide about it. I mean, I don't know what it is you want to know, but what happened was I was in Romania at the House of Sin filming with Mistress Azada, when one of my subs, who had been with me for 3 years at the time and was also a personal sub, or more of a personal sub than anything else, let himself in to clean the business unit that I used. And I was filming at the time, but my husband at the time took the call. And when I came upstairs I'd finished a scene to see how he was, because he'd traveled with me, he said to me, I think you better sit down. And instantly I panicked and thought, oh my God, what's happened? And he told me that the alchemy rooms had a break-in, and it looked like it had been mostly a hate crime because there wasn't anything stolen. Well, immediately, obviously stolen. And there was things written over the walls and things had been trashed. And I was devastated. I had a complete breakdown. I was sat with Izada and Mistress Sarah and Lady Ina in Romania and just sobbed for probably about 2 or 3 hours. And then when I came home, it took me probably about 24 hours to pluck up the courage to go and visit. I had an anxiety attack very quickly after entering. And unbeknown to me, one of my good friends, Miss Rose, and a sub who had admired me for some time had bonded together to set up a GoFundMe, because I hadn't got any contents insurance. I'd tried several companies to get insured, not knowing who to approach. Obviously, this is all new to me. I don't know who you'd approach for dungeon insurance. And the amount of times that people said to me, you need to be as honest as possible, because if you lie and you get something happen and they find out that you're not going to be covered. So I then told these 2 companies in succession, oh, it's a BDSM studio. And they're just like, yeah, we're not touching you. So when the break-in occurred, I had no contents insurance. And it tallied up to somewhere around £20,000 to £25,000 for the damage. Every piece of leather furniture in there had been slashed. Every panel of that piece of furniture had been slashed. The wheel, the beds, the gynae chair, the sling, everything had a slash mark in it. And I had 12 pairs of Louboutins in there that I used for work. They'd had some corrosive material tipped in them, which had stripped all of the colour from whatever it touched underneath and on top. They'd gone into my latex wardrobe and tipped something corrosive on top of all of my latex. They'd sprayed all the walls. They'd trashed my dildo cupboard. They really did. And it was devastating, because it was a hate crime. It wasn't a break-in where somebody had come in and thought, opportunists, and steal something. And the saddest thing is, I'll never really know 100% who it is. I can have suspicions based on coincidences. Yeah. But the police said it's somebody you likely know really well, somebody who knew the estate well to avoid the CCTV, and they staged it to look like they'd made entry one way, but very likely had made entry by leaving the fire exit unlocked, because it had a communal fire exit going into a communal part of the building.
Wow.
So it was a traumatic time for me. I was devastated. I plowed my heart and soul into that. But the biggest thing that came out of it, the positive, was the way the community stood by me. I have traveled the world. As I've said, I've been to states in America, I've been to Washington, New York, I've been to LA, I've been to California, I've been to places in Europe doing domination. And in 36 hours, the GoFundMe raised £19,000, which I think is around about $24,000. And I was blown away, because a lot of that was international. I had one gentleman I met at the the Order of Indomitus, Michelle Lacey's event. He donated $3,000 alone. So the impact that I must have had on people that I'd met throughout my time traveling really did touch me and made me feel very, very, very at home in the community. So I had contents insurance after. I no longer have the alchemy rooms at the moment. Obviously, I let it go with the COVID situation. But after that, then an adult company saw my plight online and contacted me and said, oh, we offer contents insurance. So then I was able to get contents insurance that way. So, yeah. Wow, not really sure if that's answered the question or.
I think it did. I mean, that was, I remember seeing everything going on, and I remember the donation and us posting it out because it's a hate crime and people don't realize this is the stuff that happens. And we don't get to be protected. We don't. Most insurance companies are negative. We have to take care of ourselves.
The police that came round, he was just nice enough, but you could just tell he was just crossing pieces off a piece of paper. Yeah. There was never going to be anything really done. There was 300 hours of CCTV footage that needed to be checked, and they didn't want to check it. And they were just going through the motions, and it really, really, really was hard to watch because it's like this is my livelihood. I quite often just sat in there and looked around and thought, wow, I've always wanted my place and I built this. And when they trashed it took me a good few months to go in there and feel comfortable again. And because it does feel like you've been violated, and I think it might have been better if somebody had come in and stolen a load of stuff, because at least then they'd have had a purpose. But this was genuinely to hurt and harass me. That's genuinely what somebody was aiming to do, and that felt worse.
Yeah, that is definitely worse. Stealing stuff, you're just like, okay, so you stole stuff, you're trying to whatever could be the reason.
You have a driver behind that. People steal stuff for all different reasons, but this felt like it was definitely somebody had really taken the time out to target me and known when I was out of country to do it. That's so scary. It's a very scary thing, but I'm so glad to hear how much support you got from the community, and that having this GoFundMe go up and everything. That's a really beautiful thing. I don't know how much you kept up with it, Lucy, but GoFundMe shut it down. I mean, it got so much popularity that it was trending on Twitter. And I had somebody that I used to go to pole dancing classes with who didn't know what I did way back from when I was moved away from my hometown contact me and go, what do you do for work? And I'm like, I'm a professional dominatrix. Yeah, I thought it was you. You're trending on Twitter. And I'm like, oh my God, who's going to see this? Most people in my family and everybody know, but I've got a small child, and I try to keep it away from that area. And so it was trending, and then GoFundMe did remove it. And it took me a week of battling them and threatening them with the media to give me the funds, at least, rather than they were adamant they couldn't be supporting an adult entertainer or sex worker. And they withdrew the funding and said they won't reinstate the website to gain more money. But I managed to argue them into giving me my money, because the amount of I went online and was like, everybody, look, please just tweet at them, get behind me. And I think they just did not want the exposure and the problems that may cause. But I managed to get the payout from them, but it was a hassle and a stressful time to sort it all out. See, people, these platforms, even having a GoFundMe does not guarantee you might get them. It's so much drama for all of them. I've had bank accounts denied. I've had appointments cancelled and venues, and it's just the stress of the stigma of what comes attached to sex workers. It's significant.
So I have another question. Which do you have any books, readings, films around BDSM that resonate with you?
I read, is it Elise Sutton's Female Domination book, where she's a therapist for submissive males in America. And she does, in the beginning, it's quite a lot of case studies and factual figures on universities, like how girls are doing against boys and stuff, and case studies of men who have had fetishes in their psyche since they were small, but didn't know what they were to express them until they were older, and look back and realize they had a repetitive dream and stuff. I found that really fascinating, because the psychology behind where fetishes have come from. And so, I mean, some people get introduced by media and porn and TV and stuff. That's fine. And that's great. That's their journey. But the men that have a backstory that they had something go on or occur when they were young that they couldn't explain, that materialized into becoming part of the scene, is somewhere where I really think, wow, that was just in you. It was built in you, and that's you've had to go through a journey to get to where you are. And that book definitely did resonate well with me. I quite liked the stories. I guess I've got so much literature I need to read. I've made an effort in the lockdown to read at least 10 minutes a day, and I'm getting through currently a book on PTSD, which isn't Femdom orientated, but like I said, I'm quite interested in psychology. So I've got to definitely get through a lot more of my literature, but that's the only book that really I can think of that definitely I would recommend.
Cool, thank you. We have a question. Can you explain CNFM in more detail and what your favorite aspects of it are?
Now, I would live and breathe this every day if I didn't have a 10-year-old daughter. Bit hard to explain to her why there's naked men around the house. So for me, clothed female naked male is it's a power exchange in itself. It's a visual power exchange, because you're stripping a societal item from a man that's been placed there to provide some dignity, and you're taking that away, and they sit around you with that lack of dignity, and they work around you and they operate around you and serve you like it's lacking that dignity, while I sit here fully clothed and can just enjoy that. I quite like that element of it, and that's why the vanilla corruption parties I mentioned, they are all clothed female, naked male. So and I like that, because there's an air of stripping them back to exactly what they should be and exactly what they were born like, and they've got nothing to hide behind. So that's definitely why I like that vibe.
Yeah, I mean, and it's also, you're so exposed to the elements, right?
Yeah, it's definitely amazing when it's rained at the vanilla corruption parties, because like I said, I have a marquee in the garden, but it doesn't fit everybody in at all times. The women get the favour, obviously, so I have to chuck a man out into the rain. I will.
Yeah. I do enjoy clothed female, nude male. Like, I like to be nude around my female counterparts. Like, I have, especially if it's warm or anything, I enjoy being nude around my female counterparts. But when it comes to, like, I really connect with, clothed female, nude male, like, scenes as well. And I prefer that, because it's like they can't hide anything. You're sort of, if you're cold, you're going to stay cold. You can't get warm. You can't, everything is there and out in the open. There's no way. And especially with men, right? So any moment they're excited or this or that, you can just visible, spot it out. There's no way of hiding it. So that's
there's a humiliation in that themselves, because quite often the night, as we know, that isn't always controlled by, it isn't controlled necessarily by they can't necessarily switch it on and off. It's quite amusing, yeah. I remember my mum pointing and laughing at a vanilla corruption party at some guy who couldn't control his erection. It's quite funny. Oh dear.
A total dominatrix. So we're going to take this as the last question. So before I put out this last question, for those of you out there, please, if you would like to follow Mistress Tess on social media, on her sites, on her fan site, please look below and check out all the websites, check out all the hashtags, and go ahead and follow and reach out in the appropriate areas. So our last question is, this was not the question I meant to do. What is your professional funniest moment with your beautiful mom at a party, Mistress Tess?
I have got some images of this, but at the very first one, there's two moments that spring to mind. It's one of the most recent vanilla corruption, and one of them at the very first. The very first one that she came to, I set up a whipping, like a kid's swing set, but I took the swing out, and then that was a whipping post. So we got this guy up here, and they all gather around in a semicircle, and I'm showing them a paddle, then a ball whip, and then a cane. And my mum's like, I'm like, does anybody want to go? And my mum's like, straight away, like, hand up. And she comes up and she's got it and she's swinging. And I'm like, no, you got to swing like this. And I kind of then behind her like a golf swing. I'm like, I've got the paddle in my hand, but I've got hold of my mum's hand. And I'm trying to teach her how to swing it to make sure she hits his ass correctly. And then I let her go off, and the photographer, who was my sissy, he was taking some photos. He's got pictures of my mum's literally like, expressions are like she's really trying to aim and concentrate. And I thought it was hilarious. And then the most recent one, I introduced her last year to Bastinado. And she's got a guy in a gyno chair, and his feet are up, and I was, where do I hit? And I was like, try and aim for the arches at the feet, man. Don't hit too close to the toes or anything. And she's doing it, and I'm like, no, and I cover the toes, and then she hits my hand. She hits my hand in the middle, and I'm like, oh my God. It's just hilarious. She's just funny. Yeah.
Oh God, if I
of course, I'm going to say the last time as well, like I said, with the giant dildo scene where she's cuddling this giant dildo, I did actually stick my foot up that guy that time because he's quite an anal slut for me. He's one of my regulars. And I'm like, Mum, she sat across the room, I'm like, Mum, come over and watch me stick my foot in this guy. And she's like, no, I'm not coming. I'm like, Mum, come on, you want to see me stick my foot in this guy? Like, I'm not watching. She's not really into anal, so I found it hilarious trying to wind her up. Like, Mum, I'm putting my foot up this guy's ass. Are you proud of me?
Oh, that is so amazing, so entertaining. She's like, no, sweetie, go ahead and do that. I'll be over here. That is so hilarious. So I know I said this would be the last question, but this one actually relates to kind of something we talked about earlier about, just sort of plans, which is post-pandemic, will you continue to plan and have your group events?
Yes. So I'm keen and almost desperate to, but do it safely, obviously. The Gynarchy governance, for those who haven't seen it, is, I think it's gynarchy-governance.co.uk, or it's Gynarchy governance, all one word. I'm not entirely certain what it is at the moment. But it is an event that I got inspired by Michelle Lacey's event, the Order of Dominatrix, when I visited in 2018, to do a full high protocol slave training event where we have a group of house doms and a group of men, and they sleep in cages and they do certain events, and they have to do domestic chores, and then we have a play party in the evenings and stuff. I am desperate to get this event done. I've done so much planning for it. I found the location, which took a lot of research, and it was initially planned for September this year. It's pushed back to May, but the way things are slipping with the COVID, it looks like, to make everybody more comfortable. I've already got 8 deposits, but I would hate to think that people are struggling and don't want to lose their deposit but do want to come. I may push it back to autumn next year. I really, really love having, like I said, the unusual events is something I really want to push forward. And the Vanilla Corruption, I've found another place to have that outdoors. So as soon as it is safe to do so, I will be back to doing the events I'm known for, as well as the Gynarchy governance. It's just whenever that will be is anybody's guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say, thank you everyone for joining us tonight for our weekly broadcast. Thank you so very much, Mistress Tess, for staying up late, super late to be on our show. And then this will also get uploaded onto YouTube, which I'll send to you. But for anybody who needs to rewatch, or if you want to link it out, it will be up on YouTube in a day or two. Okay. So thank you again, Tess, for joining us. Thank you all for joining us, and have a good night, everyone.